Hi, I'm Leanne and welcome again to the channel where we make things just because. If you've seen my recent Instagram post, you will have seen that I have recently finished making my very first corset, which took me about a year. Now it's time to make an outfit to go with that corset, and I am 100% Outlander inspired. Claire's dresses are so beautiful with all of the layers and the colours and the amazing fabrics, and I want one. Now my sewing skills are pretty basic to say the least, so I don't think I could make any of the kind of fancier dresses. However, one of these more simple ones, I think I can try and do. So in true Leanne fashion, it's time to say I can do that and ride into the battlefield that is sewing. So now let me give you a breakdown of how I did it. So there are two patterns that I have used to attempt to make this dress. The first one was for the corset, so it's this one here. And I use this variant just here, not sure if you can see that. So this is the Butterick 4254. It's part of their Making History collection. Not entirely sure how accurate that is, but that is the one I have made. And the second pattern I'm going to use is this one. And I'm going to be making this one here. So this is the Simplicity 8161. This also does come with a separate pattern for the undergarments and stuff, but I couldn't get that in my size, so I'm going to make that bit up. So this journey begins in the raiding of my fabric stash. With the current lockdown situation, I'm not able to go out and buy fabric, and I hate buying fabric online, so we're going to have to make do. I'm not too worried about which fabric I end up with, as this is just a test run of this dress, but I still want it to look pretty. Okay, so after raiding my stash, the fabric that I've decided I'm going to use for the main dress is this green velvet that matches the corset that I already made. The reason for that is you need about 4 meters of fabric to make that dress, and that is the only fabric I have currently in my stash in any kind of quantity, so that's the option for that. There are a couple other bits I do need. I need about 1 meter of fabric for lining, so I'm probably just going to use this black cotton because you're not going to see it anyway. And then you need some fabric for the stomacher. Now I've got two options for this. I have this, this brown cotton, which will be fine. And I also have this brown fake suede material, which I might use if there's not enough of the cotton, but we'll see. Not sure. I guess we'll find out. There are a few extra things you're going to see me use throughout the course of this dress. These include eyelets, zip ties, some lacing, various bias binding, some cotton tape, and a few sewing odds and ends. Before we get into the making of the actual dress, we're going to need a shift to go under my corset. If you have watched any videos about these old corsets, you will have been told many times that this is a requirement. So the plan for this shift is to make the main body 27 inches wide, and for the length I'm just going to leave it as long as I can on this piece of fabric. For the neckline, I'm going to measure down 10 inches and make a curve. The gap on the shoulder will be 5 inches, and the rear neckline curve will also be 5 inches. The rest I'm going to just do as we go. So I'm going to start by taking my folded over bedsheet and measuring the width that I want the shift to be. I'm going to leave the full length on this fabric for the maximum length on the shift, and it also means I won't need to hem it. I then transferred the rest of my measurements onto the fabric to map out my neckline. Using this very professional random piece of wood, I connected all of my markings. Don't judge me, I don't have a ruler long enough for this. In order to trace out the curves, I also used this very professional pot of paint as a template. I could have also used a plate or a large cup, or you know, I could have actually gone and bought the French curve. Meh. As you can see, I just lined this up with my 2 lines and drew the curve between them. Then I just repeated this all on the back. So here is what my markings look like when I was done. Once I had this all marked out, I then cut out the main section of the shift. The next thing I needed to do was alter the pattern for my sleeves. I'm using the pattern from the main overdress, but I want the sleeves to be straight and a little longer. I'm not going to lie, this took me a few attempts. You can see the first one failing here as the sleeves are still curved. After a couple of tries, I finally bodged together a pattern I liked and cut that bad boy out. And here is me being too lazy to walk to a mirror and checking it looks okay in the viewfinder of the camera. Now I can just sew these sleeves together. Once I got those sleeves together, I needed to dry fit them into the body of the shift to work out how big the armhole needed to be for them. This turned out to be 9.5 inches. I then transferred this measurement onto the other side. So I sewed up the sides of the shift, making sure to leave that gap at the top for the arms to fit in. Now I set the sleeves into the shift, making sure to use lots of pins. Sleeves are really hard to sew in, and I didn't want them to move around and end up getting distorted. Then I super slowly and super awkwardly sewed both of the sleeves into place. This is the first time I've not had to unpick and re-sew a set of sleeves, so go me! Unfortunately, because it took me so long to work out how to make these sleeves, I did end up needing to hem them. Once that was done, I pinned the hem on the neckline and clipped it so that it would lay flat. Now instead of sewing a turned over hem here, I added bias binding all the way around to create a channel for some tape to go through, so that I'd be able to cinch it down to fit. So here is the finished shift. Is it historically accurate? No. Is it well constructed? Also no, but it will do the job, so let's move on. Because this dress has an open front, it is going to require a petticoat or skirt to go underneath. For this I needed two measurements. First is the length, which in my case is 41 inches. I also needed my waist measurement, which is 26 inches. So the plan to make this petticoat is to cut out my fabric 60 inches across, as this is a fairly standard width for fabric. We also need to make it 41 inches long. We are then going to sew up the sides, leaving a gap of 8 inches at the top so that the sides can overlap. I am then going to pleat in the waist to fit my measurements, plus 6 inches, again so that this can overlap at the sides. This is so that we can't see through the gap, as no one wants to be walking around with their pants on show. So I began by laying out my fabric doubled over. I then measured out the width of my skirt. Following that by measuring out the length from a hemmed edge so that I won't have to hem this later. Once all of that was plotted out, I can get on with cutting it out. I then pleated down the waist. Now I did this off camera because it took me way longer than it should have done, but I eventually settled on a centre square pleat and pleats leading towards the edges on both sides. I temporarily sewed these into place. I then sewed the side seams together, making sure not to sew past the mark for the side overlap. So this is the little gap at the top that you're left with so that they can overlap later on. I then sewed on a strip of bias along the top. This acted as both the strings to tie it with and also sealed all the pleats into place. So this is how it looked when it was all done. I also added a second one because these old-timey ladies are like onions. I also thought the green would look better with this dress. Before we go any further with this particular part of the dress, I just wanted to give a little disclaimer. I'm not going to give you any in-depth knowledge of how I made this dress because, quite frankly, I don't really know how to read the patterns for these, and honestly they sound a bit like: to stitch dart seams in sleeve with right sides together, bring broken lines together carefully matching small dots. On inside, place pins at right angles to the broken lines. Stitch the dart seam from outer edge. Whereas in my head it sounds like: you are strong and independent and you don't need to follow any pattern instructions. But I did try to follow the pattern to the best of my ability, and you know, we got done what we got done. Right, now we can finally get on with the actual dress. I cut out all the pattern pieces I needed. I like to mark them off as I go to ensure that I have them all before I get started. I then laid out all the pieces onto the fabric, making sure to lay the pattern pieces according to the lines that tell you which way they should be on the fabric. I then pinned these all down and cut them out. This whole part of sewing really frustrates me. It just seems to take forever and I just want to be able to get on with the sewing part. Now with all the pieces ready to go, I can pin together and sew together all the bodice pieces. Once those are all together, it looks a little something like this. Then I sewed together and inserted the sleeves. Now apologies, but I thought I had filmed this part, but I can't seem to find the footage anywhere. It took me ages. I incorrectly sewed both the pleats and the darts in the sleeve about a gazillion times. Then I finally gave up and accepted that it was as good as it was going to get. I also promptly ignored all the parts about the sleeve ruffs because I don't like them, and so I hemmed the sleeves instead, because if I didn't do this now, I would definitely regret it later. Hi guys, quick update on what I got up to last night. So I got all the pattern pieces cut out, everything laid on the fabric, all the fabric cut out, and I have constructed the outer part of the bodice. So you've got the bodice front and the sleeves. Now there are a couple of issues already, not to be surprising. So the first one, I don't know if you guys picked it up on the clip of me laying out the pattern pieces, but I laid all of the bodice pieces upside down on the fabric, so the nap now runs the wrong way up and down. Hopefully you won't be able to tell that once it's all done. This sleeve is not the best. I'm going to take that apart and try and redo that, but we'll see how that goes. So the next part to do now is to do the skirt, which involves the pleats, which I'm not entirely looking forward to, but hopefully it will all go great. So I'll update you once I've done that. The pleats of this were a little tricky because I couldn't mark them out onto the fabric as I normally would, and I had to mark them with pins instead. Once these were all in, however, I could finally sew all of the skirt pieces together. Now I could actually pleat the skirt. This took a very long time and so many pins. Look how small each of these pleats really are. I then sewed the skirt into place on the bodice so that I wouldn't have to keep sticking myself with any pins anymore. So guys, sewing update number 2. As you can see, we've still got the bodice as we had last time, but we've now added the skirt with its many pleats. These pleats gave me a little bit of trouble, mostly because of the fabric. So the fabric is really slidey and stretchy, and you can't iron it because it's velvety, and so I couldn't press any of the pleats into place, and I had to pin them, and they kept moving around. I also had some problems with the pattern. I think that a part of the pattern was not printed, so I had to kind of alter it myself a little bit, and that was, I don't think, right, because the skirt is now too big for the bodice. So maybe I shouldn't have altered it, but I didn't understand what the instructions were telling me, so here we are. The next thing to do is to put some boning in the front and the eyelets on, and then we're pretty much there. This bodice is supposed to be lined. I may or may not line it. You may never find out, so we will see. But yeah, I'm gonna crack on. Now I don't have any boning, and quite frankly, I wouldn't know where to begin with getting it. So instead, I have zip ties. I cut them to length and filed down the edges to make them smooth, then inserted them into the dress as per the instructions. I did end up having to create a lining for this bodice so that I could insert the boning. This meant that I had to do some hand stitching, which I really suck at, but it does close off the inside and make it look really nice. Now for the dreaded hemming of the bottom of the skirt, but it was a straight line and it did go fairly quickly. So the finishing touches on this dress are the eyelets, which you can see I have marked out here. These were fairly simple to install. I first marked with an awl exactly where it needed to go. Then I popped in a hole with this other tool. Finally, I popped in the actual eyelet, and then it was smashing time. And this is how those eyelets looked, all laced up. The final piece for this dress was the stomacher piece. You simply needed to cut out the pattern, sew around the edges, transfer over the pattern lines for the boning, stitch along those lines, add some boning in, finish the top stitching, and then pop it all into place. And voila! Let's see how everything looks. So there's been an awful lot to get done in this video. I've made 4 or 5 pieces for this dress, and it's taken me a long time. However, I have learned a lot of new things. I've also learned a lot of things that I really don't like doing, but ultimately the dress, while nothing like Claire's dress, is beautiful and it makes me feel like a pirate queen, so I'm super happy about it. Now this dress is by no means perfect. The hems are wonky, the underarms are too tight. You know, there's just so many things that I could improve on this project, and I definitely plan to do that. Now I am planning to make another one of these dresses in a more kind of traditional style, less pirate, more actual 18th century. So if you want to see me do that, then please subscribe below. Thank you guys so much for watching today, and goodbye.